I'm Emma.
And I'm Lucas.
And welcome to
Two
Baroque
Baroque
Baddies.
Baddies.
So for this episode of Baroque Baddies, first we're going to talk about some recent Baroque news.
So, Pernambuco wood, which is native to Brazil, is currently a Appendix 2 export, which means that it has to have a certain permit when it's exported from Brazil to other countries for bow making. And Pernambuco is a very important wood to bow making because it kind of became important during the late Baroque, early Classical period because it's a wood that's more flexible and sturdier than snakewood was at the time, and that's what they used. So Brazil and the Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, they're working together to move Pernambuco wood from a Appendix 2 to an Appendix 1 export. Appendix 1 means that it cannot be exported from its native country at all. And they just kind of want to preserve their forests, preserve their wildlife. And so I see this coming to have a shift from Pernambuco being the staple wood of bow making now to moving back in time to different types of hardwoods like snakewood.
Yeah. I didn't realize that bows had like specific wood types, and I didn't realize that the new one would make it better, like environmentally, you said, right?
No, well, I don't know that it's gonna have like an environmental shift. I had no idea that Pernambuco was an endangered species. I actually don't use a Pernambuco bow. I use a snakewood bow.
Hey, well, now you might need to change that up.
No, my snakewood bow is not going out of style. It is not.
Right.
But like they say that Pernambuco is so much better, but like you could give like a little kid a Pernambuco bow and they would not sound any different. Like it doesn't really matter. It's just like all personal. It's like personal preference.
Well, have you tried the Pernambuco?
The
Pernambuco.
Stop. No, I have not tried the Pernambuco bow. I have tried, however, Pernambuco. I don't really like it because I have a heavy hand, so it's not for me. But you know, like it's to each their own.
Right. Well, you know, in some other Baroque news, there's talks of rebuilding the first ever opera house. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
It was called San Cassiano, and it was the first opera house which opened in Venice back in 1637, a long, long time ago. And it held a bunch of different operas at this time. But unfortunately, it was demolished back in 1812. It was open for like over 100 years, but it was demolished to make room for a garden. Isn't that stupid?
Okay.
But a man named Paul Atkins, who's very passionate about music and specifically Baroque music, which is what we're going to get into in a few minutes. Boring. He's supposedly hoping to rebuild it in the coming years, maybe in like the 2030s. I think that's what
I think he wanted.
discussed.
I think I remember actually reading this, and that he wanted to open it 400 years after its original open date, which would be 2037.
Yeah, I remember I saw an article. It was let me see.
Or maybe we could do 430 years and have it open in 26/7.
Anyways.
Hold on.
Yeah, so according to an article from OperaWire.com, Paul Atkins was actually looking to rebuild it in 1997. That's when this first idea came about when he was studying in Italy. And he like remembered that it was the first ever opera house that came about, and he was inspired to just bring it back to life and have more operas premiere and perform there.
Hey. And
he was actually, when this idea was proposed, he said that if he started building every single day, it would be ready by 2024. But look where we are now.
Hey, we're in the big 2-5.
COVID happened, you know.
Oh, yes, you know, COVID babies.
Yeah, COVID. Right. So that's your Baroque news for you. Hey. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of Baroque opera. French versus Italian.
I'm going to whoop ya. So, Italian opera is what started it all. She's that girl. She was the doer, and you cannot outdo her. So, some characteristics of Italian opera per the San Francisco Opera House. Opera, which is directly translated into a piece of work, is a type of subgenre of music that combines recitative secco and recitative accompagnaggio, something like that, which basically is like dry recitative, which is just spoken words with no music under it, and accompanied recitative, which is like speaking with a little bit of harmony, interjections, and interludes, and like musical flourishes that make the recitative more interesting
Yeah.
because it was boring. And so these different types of recitative combined with these virtuosic arias and just music, instrumental accompaniment, which could have been like a type of orchestra ensemble because we had instruments that were being made better with more projection, sounding more like the voice during this time, during the Baroque period. That's when string instruments became what we now know today as like the violoncello, viola bass. Didn't have the piano. We had the pianoforte, which is a plucked keyboard instrument, kind of like a harpsichord. Could only play at two dynamics, piano and forte. Who knew? The first opera that was ever written was an Italian opera by Jacopo Peri. It's called Daphne, which is about a Greek story and like a Greek. They were based on Greek myths, and actually, before opera came about, there was a group of poets, musicians, and philosophers called the Florentine Cameretta, which kind of took these Greek tragedies and myths and made them into a musical genre called opera. So these early operas were only based on these tragedies and myths, and so they combined like this dancing and different types of recitative and instrumental accompaniment into a like overall musical piece that was played in these opera houses, such as the one that you were talking about. And this really started in Florence, Italy. And operas were kind of focused on virtuosity and things like coloratura, which is large musical embellishments, wide ranges. Like, have you ever seen, what's that opera by Mozart? The Queen of the Night.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
Miss Coloratura right here.
Hey.
And that's basically what a coloratura is.
Yeah.
And like these Italians, they love comedic interludes. They just love to laugh.
Of course.
They had so much time on their hands that they were going to operas, just doing whatever. And these big operas such as Daphne, Orfeo, or in Coronosa de Popea, these works combined this recitative, these intermezzi, which were the comedic interludes, with sung aria. We kind of had like Handel in his opera. Handel wasn't really known for anything besides that Messiah. Which shout out Christmas time. He didn't really have anything, but whoa. Who do you have? French opera?
Yes, I'd love to talk about it. May I talk about it?
No.
So I'm gonna segue and talk about French opera, which did come from Italian opera. I will give you credit there. It developed in Italy. However, the French basically like had a model to go off of, and they had an opportunity to make it better and more compatible for their audiences, making it in French language and offering more dramatic scenes and more ballets. And they incorporated a lot of ballets and different types of dances into their operas, which were called divertissement. And it actually gave a chance for King Louis XIV, who was a huge part of the development of French opera, to dance in these long overtures and have the opportunity to perform in front of the people around him in the audience. Isn't that crazy? So yeah. French opera basically did come from Italian opera, but it had a bunch of different qualities. It had a more dramatic melodies within the music. It had more instrumental music, like I said, to incorporate the dancing and the ballets and the king's opportunity to dance, which, fun fact, the people did not enjoy the king's dancing. They thought he looked like a fool, and they laughed. Actually, there were no repetitive arias. They called it recitativo cantato, which was just sung recitative. Instead of like repeated arias and repeated phrases, they emphasized the words and the text of the music instead of just repeating everything over and over again. That way to give it more dramatic and more meaningful effect. This style of opera would utilize the beauty of pauses and rests that way to give it more drama. Look, one thing about French opera is that they loved drama. They ate it up. So French opera incorporated a lot of pauses and rests specifically into the music, so there would be no singing. And they would just utilize the beauty of a moment and just revel in it and just soak in all that drama.
A grand pause.
Yeah, there was also zero ornamentation, so there's more like speech-like singing, again to focus on like the actual words and text. And there was no castrati as opposed to the Italian opera. They had something called haute contre, or I think I'm pronouncing it right, and it's basically just a countertenor, in a French countertenor.
Hey.
Oui. And then according to the Kennedy Center website, this is where the origin of French opera came from. It came about because of Jean-Baptiste Lully, who was the composer in the court of King Louis XIV, and they were actually besties, ride or die.
Hey.
And the goal for French opera
Two
as a
Baroque
whole,
baddies.
hey, that's us. And then Jean-Baptiste created an opera called Atis, which was actually known as the King's Opera because Louis XIV favored it very highly. He loved that opera, and he basically just like claimed it as his in a way. However, there was some controversy when Jean-Philippe Rameau, I think that's how to pronounce it, he became the successor to the throne, and he produced music, like French opera music, that was very different than Lully's. So Rameau's was a lot more dramatic and much heavier. It had a darker tone to it. However, Lully's was more lighter, still more majestic melodies. It had that dramatic effect to it, but it was a lot lighter, and less, a little more lighthearted, to the ears at least. And the French people, honestly, like their love for each of them divided. Like one half liked Lully's, one half liked Rameau's. It all just depended on what they liked.
That's very polarizing.
Yeah, very polarizing indeed. Rameau's first opera was called, pardon my pronunciation, Hippolyte et Aricia. That's actually probably entirely wrong. I'll repronounce it later. And it was just a very intense French opera, and it created a violent contrast to Lully's, and it sparked a major controversy in like the future of opera and how it would progress further out in the future. So basically what me and Lucas right here are trying to internally debate is which opera style we think is better and was better at this time during the Baroque era. And me personally, I think the French opera is better than Italian. I will give Italian opera its flowers because it did develop first and it started the path for opera to become what it has become today. However, like I said before, it had the advantage of having something to model off of. French opera speaking. French opera was able to incorporate aspects of Italian opera and make it something much better and more feasible for the French people specifically.
I think that while the French opera had its time, with the vernacular and with the dancing and like all those things that they really thought that they were that girl when they sat there and they were like, yeah, I'm gonna write this opera. We're gonna have a dance break for King Louis. They both had their moments. Who did it better? I don't think anybody did it better. I think that you can't go back and be like, Renaissance music sucked, but romantic music is so much better than Renaissance because they're completely different things. Like we have, and we're in the Renaissance. Where are we gonna go? 1. What comes next? 5. Where are we gonna go from 5 to 1? And then like in the Romantic period, it's the same. Like music is all the same. Like it's just tension and release. And so like when you get those contrasting things that are different and they're different periods, they're different styles, obviously like everything's built off what it was before. And like you can't really compare anything. It's like comparing apples to like a potato. Yeah. Like while they are both like plants, they're also very different. Like Italian opera being like the first to come about and to be like we're coming off of nothing, and this is the style that we decided to create. And then with French opera, we're taking what you have, but we're gonna make it our own. It's kind of like you remember in the Renaissance period where they had like the Catholic Church and everybody was fighting because they were like, oh, this music is better, our style, our hymn, our anthem, our 5-part mass that takes an hour is better than yours. Like I think that kind of like everything is different.
Yeah.
Everything is different.
I agree. Like obviously both Italian and French operas are different and they have their own great qualities to them. I guess just on like a personal standpoint, I think French is more entertaining because like I said earlier, it incorporates a lot more dramatic appeal and more sentimental value, I think. Like
Right.
with those pauses in those melodies
And we're fighting
like more instrumental music.
Yeah.
And actually, fun fact, French opera, according to UK Essays, a website, French opera is usually composed of 5 acts total, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Ooh.
And
What happened to 6
Italian,
and 7?
what comes after 5? And Italian is only composed of 3, so French opera already has more room for entertainment quality and then just like more storytelling. And I will say that both French and Italian operas had these long overtures, like I said. French were obviously longer to incorporate more dancing, but Italian operas did still have those long overtures, which the French did model. And actually, before, like when they were thinking about creating opera thanks to Lully, it didn't really spark really early on. It originally, because the French already had their own form of entertainment called the ballet de corps, which translates to an English court ballet, which incorporates more of that dancing like we talked about. Which I think, honestly, now thinking about it, Lully probably took inspiration from Italian opera and this ballet de corps and combined it into what we know today as tragédie lyrique. And yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to say here is I agree with your point. Like obviously both are very different and have different qualities and mean basically like the apples and potatoes thing. They're two separate things. I just personally enjoy the French better. So.
I honestly think that we kind of fell off after like French and Italian Baroque opera because we moved to classical period where we have like Mozart and like classical composers like Haydn and like all this boring stuff like classical music is boring. Then we move to the Romantic period where we have like post-Romantic going into modern, like that kind of neo-Romantic area where we have Wagner, which had like 3-day-long operas. I think we kind of lost the plot with that.
Yeah.
So like this is like the meat and potatoes of operas starting in the Baroque. And we also had Fire Counterpoint in the Baroque. But
okay, well I think that's all the time we have for this podcast. So I want to thank everyone who's listening. Like and subscribe, give us a follow, and if it ain't Baroque,
don't fix it.